along. Hey, blokes. Is this working? Yes. Is that working? Can you hear me? Yes, excellent. I realised I made a terrible mistake. I'm wearing a pencil skirt and I'm on a stool on a dais. The stool is the invention of the patriarchy, let's face it. No woman is comfortable on it. If you see anything you shouldn't see, just shout out, let me know. I think my public liability insurance covers me for flashing you, and I can pay you compensation for sexual trauma. Hello! It's so lovely to be back here. I love how this is a recurrent thing, and I just come back here every 2 years and see you all. Was there anyone here last time I came? Cool, so you've all seen my belly, fat, and breasts. For those who didn't come last time, I've got this thing called my Feminist Smile, where I talk about how after years of hating my body, and I hate my body because of the patriarchy, and now I love my body, and I do this thing where I draw eyes on my bra and a nose on my belly, and then I flap out my belly over the top of my shorts, and I manipulate my belly rolls into a smile, and my belly fat into a big feminist smile, and my whole body's smiling at you, and it's great. And only 3 people cried because they were scared. What was amazing about that is that a photographer was here and sold that picture to the Daily Mail online. I don't know, do you know do you have the Daily Mail over here? Okay, so you know it's evil. It's a tool of Satan. And they ran this huge thing about outrageous feminist Johanna Morrigan reveals her belly fat to 100 people in a bookstore. And then they do this formulaic thing where at the end of anything, so usually it's a piece about, I don't know, Rihanna's been seen at somewhere and so forth, get the look. And they'll have a whole thing about how you can buy the designer clothes she's wearing. And they did the same thing with me. And it was like, it was a $20 bra with an eye drawn on it. You can't get that anywhere. I made that. That's my genius. So hello, it's lovely to see you all again. The book I have written, this book that I'm talking about at the moment, is currently, and until tomorrow at least, we'll find out with the next charts, #1 in Britain. Hooray! My main competition was against Bill Clinton, who's written a very poor thriller, which inexplicably sold huge amounts in the UK. And so I very shamelessly tweeted a great deal and emailed everybody on my mailing list with the subject title, "Help me beat off Bill Clinton and get to #1." What amazed me was the amount of people who would then on Twitter go, "Oh, I don't know if you've noticed what you've just said there. It sounded a bit suggestive." Dude, what do you think I do? It's my job. This is what I do. Knob gags, that's what I do. Anyway, so the book, How to Be Famous. It's the second in what will be a trilogy, if this one sells enough. And we're following Johanna Morrigan from her early origins as a 14-year-old working class girl in Wolverhampton who's very overweight and wants to have a great deal of sex. I don't know where I got that idea from. And we're going to follow her all the way through her life. This is the second part, How to Be Famous, whereby she has now moved down to London at the beginning of BritPop, where for 2 years everything was amazing in Britain. It was the second ever biggest cultural revolution that we'd ever had that involved the working classes. There were all these incredible bands. There's Oasis and Blur and Pulp. All these songs were getting in the top 10. Everyone felt very confident. It felt like for 2 years there were no winters. It was just an endless summer that lasted for 24 months. And everybody smoked cigarettes whilst riding around on a vintage bicycle. And we all felt great about ourselves. And then sadly everyone started taking heroin and Radiohead turned up. But for 2 years it was awesome. And so this book is set during the awesome bit. But even during the awesomeness, bad things happen, and particularly if you are a girl. This was a very male-centered cultural revolution that we were having. And it was the beginning of ironic sexism. So it would be the beginning of kind of lads being, all right, we're lads, we're legendary lads, oi, oi, oi. And their relationship to you as a teenage girl, to me as a teenage girl, would be basically to call me Tits McGee. And then if I was like, that seems a bit sexist, be like, can't you take a joke, Tits McGee? And consequently making me feel angry for about 5 years. But I waited 20 years, and now I have my revenge. And the main plot of this is that I wanted to write about sex. It's not a coincidence that nearly everything I write is dirty and filthy and about disgusting things. So I just don't think we talk about sex enough. How I learned about sex was by reading books when I was a teenage girl. I didn't go to school, I was home educated, I went to the library, I read all these books. And so all the sex education I got generally was from books. That worked in some ways. I read the brilliant books of Jackie Collins and Julie Cooper. They are fruity, they taught me a great deal. But a lot of the sex that I read was by men. and their descriptions of women and what courtship should be like and what love should be like and what desire was. And that did not work for me as a teenage girl. I would read, for instance, there's that beautiful Raymond Chandler line where he's talking about she was the kind of dame that would make an archbishop kick in a stained glass window. Now that is a brilliant line. I was just like, fuck, I want to write that line. That's so brilliant. I love you, Raymond Chandler. Except, reading that as a 14-year-old girl, still trying to work out what I should be as an adult woman, I was like, shit, is that the kind of woman I've got to be? A dame, the kind of dame that makes men want to destroy architecture. This is... I'm just a fat girl in leggings who just fancies a bit of a fumble. This is going to be effortful. Similarly, the books of Ian Fleming, the James Bond books, there's one description that he has in one of the books where he talks about a woman having nipples like hazelnuts. And I found that alarming and disturbing. Partially because I got it confused and I thought he meant walnuts. And I was like, that is a hunk of chunk. And secondly, because at the time my favorite yogurt flavor was hazelnut flavor. And so it meant that every time I ate one, I would feel slightly mournful, but also slightly aroused. And that's not what you want when you're 10. So what I wanted to do was write about sex from the female point of view. And these are, I mean, my wheelhouse, what I like to do is write about the secret things, the dirty things, the taboo things, anything we're supposed to keep in a corner and keep quiet about. I'm like, hey, no one else is talking about that. That's going to be for me. And we talk so little about sex from a female point of view that we don't have words for it. For instance, there's a bit in this book where Johanna is talking about she's having amazing sex and she gets wet because that's one of the mechanics of sex. And then we realize that there is no name for that fluid. There's no name for that. We've got a million ways that we describe sperm and spaff and spooge and spunk and bad tapioca and kind of evil tip X. But there's nothing to describe the mechanics of a woman having sex. In the book, the guy that she's having sex with is a guilty Catholic, and he decides in the end that they should call it the Virgin Mary's guilty tears. But that's still not that much of a solution. Similarly, there aren't words to describe getting turned on. Men have got, like, a hard on, you've got a semi, you've got chode, you're a rocket in your pocket, you've got a canoe in your pocket, or just pleased to see me. Women have got wide on, which sounds like a garage door, it's not what I'm trying to convey, I don't want it to sound capacious. I'm kind of like, I don't want it to sound like you can park 2 or 3 cars in there. I don't want a wide on. So when I've been doing my tours, I've been asking people to suggest words that we could use. One of them, oh God, no, of course, there's a language problem here, isn't there? Because one of them suggested fanny fireworks, but that doesn't work for you guys because that's around the back here. That's just a gas issue. So now I don't even have fanny fireworks, shit. And so lots about sex. We talk about good sex, we talk about bad sex. One of the good sexes that I wanted to talk about was a man losing his virginity to a woman. Because we read so much about women losing their virginity to men. That's one of the big sexes that we see written about time after time. And I've never understood why we really go on about that as a culture. Because the first time you have sex as a girl, that's usually one of the bad sexes, or the not great sexes. There's the blood, there's the pain, there's the chafing, there's the terrible fear of getting pregnant, even though you've made him put on 6 condoms and come in the bathroom inside a sleeping bag. You will still be very scared. Whereas when a boy loses his virginity, that's a much easier. There's not as much. That's an easier one. There's not as much fear. You're the one who's, you're the experienced lady. You're here helping this guy out. That's going to be fun. I like to think about what persona that I've got in the times that I have deflowered a man. For me, I'm some kind of 19th century strumpet, some kind of good time girl. I live in my farm up in yonder hills. The time has come to take my pigs to market. So I've got a pig under each arm as I walk down into the village. There's a fair on. I sell my pigs at the fair. I've got my pig money. I buy my cider. I have a drink. I see a shy young man in the field where the wheat has been sheaved. We go and have sex, and he's very grateful. And that's mainly what I'm looking for in a sexual partner. Mel out of Mel and Sue, who present the Great British Bake Off, was once asked what she looks for in a sexual partner, and she said gratitude. And I was like, yeah, that is correct. That is primarily what you want. It's not that difficult. So we talk a great deal about sex in the book. And then we talk about taking a man's virginity. We talk about, there's what I've tried to do is write the best shag of all time ever in there. At one point, I won't say where because I'll give away the plot. I'm still waiting for my husband to read this book, so every time I come back, I'm kind of like, as I walk through the door, I'm like, has he got to that bit yet? Because we're going to have an amazing shag tonight. Still nothing. So it's hidden in plain view. And then the main driver of the plot is bad sex. And this is the whole point of writing this book was I'd come up with a plot 10 years ago, and it's about a girl who goes and has willing consensual sex with a man, but it becomes icky and a bit shit and bad. So we're not talking about criminal in a Me Too way. That Me Too is criminal stuff, that is stuff you will go to court for. What we're talking about is a whole other arena of stuff that recent things like the Cat Person essay and the Aziz Ansari thing have brought to our attention, which is like, these are not criminal acts, this is shit sex. This is people who do not know what they're doing. This is where we need to be having, this is where culture really needs to step in, where men and women need to be able to start talking about what they want from sex, what is good, what is bad, where you're crossing a line. So we've always got some kind of peer review that we come up with culturally about what good sex and what bad sex is. I suggested that there should be a website, and we should call it Dick Advisor. And this would be a good way of learning what we do and do not like. But this is the driver of the plot. She has this sex that is not illegal, but is unpleasant. And then there are subsequent consequences to this. She realizes that he has filmed it and he is now showing it to people. So she's being sexually shamed. This is revenge porn. And I wanted to write this because I was like, what would you do if this happened to you? What would you do if you are one person and something that you have done willingly and joyfully and gleefully is now been turned into something that is shaming you? You are being made to feel bad about this, even though you have done nothing wrong. How can one girl fight back against one powerful, in this book he's a famous, powerful man? And the device that I found to do this, I was so happy about, but I can't tell you because it's the big plot twist. But since it came out in UK last week, I have had 50 women a day tweeting me going, oh my God, I've got to that chapter. I've seen what happened. I am standing on a chair. Like, you have come to save us. This is amazing. This is blowing my mind. I wish I'd had this when I was a teenager. And this is all I want to do. The whole point for me of writing a book is that it should be useful. You should get to the end of this book, you should have been entertained, you should have laughed, hopefully you'd be quite turned on the good shags. But it should also be useful. You should know what to do in the future if these things happen to you. This is the point of culture for me. We pass these informations on. And in that spirit, I have written a description of how you can identify very early on a bad man. There are a lot of bad men out there. What I really needed as a teenage girl when I came down to London with my heart and my legs open was for someone to take me to one side and maybe pull down some kind of map and go, okay, the bad men are here and the good men are here, and this is how you will identify them. But sadly, no one ever does this for you, so I will now tell you how to identify a bad man. So, the bad man is called Jerry Sharp. He's a young, sexy rock and roll comedian, and he's not based on anyone famous that I used to know at all. I know that because there's a legal disclaimer at the front of the book. So he could not in any way be based on someone that I knew at that time. In later years, when I'm having a long lunch with some girlfriends and we take it in turns to talk about the worst men in the world, they come up with a list of things that, if you see them in a man's flat, tip you off that you are in the presence of a bad man. As they point out, whilst drinking wine and howling with laughter, Jerry Sharp's flat had the full set. A framed John Coltrane poster, a framed Betty Blue poster, a bookshelf filled with Hunter S. Thompson, Nietzsche, Jack Kerouac, Henry Miller, and books about the Third Reich. Several hats. This is key. Very often, more often than not, a man wearing a hat is like a brilliant, easy to recognize sign across the room at a party, like they put a lid of evil on top of their heads, so you may easily identifiable and simply walk away from them. That man in the hat accepted. That's a nice hat. I like that hat. Because you're here, and that makes you a good man. That hat should say good man on it. A velvet frock coat. This is another really important thing. A man who's wearing a long, flowing, romantic velvet frock coat thinks he is a tortured poet. You do not want to go out with a tortured poet. Your life is, yes, the lady who went out with a tortured poet. Lady, I hear you. Yep, absolutely not. Poetry should be a private matter, a slightly shameful matter, and I don't want to know anything about it. Particularly not when I'm trying to breastfeed a child. Get away from me! An angry-looking cat and a litter tray full of cat shit. Some ironic Virgin Marys. The complete works of both The Fall and Frank Zappa. Frank Zappa's a huge sign, I have to say. If you haven't found this out yet, I tell you now. Big Frank Zappa fan, walk out the door, climb out of a window, go up a chimney if you need to. A pile of pornography, a bottle of absinthe, and a coffee table with noticeable scratch marks from chopping out cocaine. Any woman, when she sees these things, must run, my friends conclude, laughing and crying at the same time, because this is the house of a man who hates women. And they are correct. However, because I'm still only 18 at the time and have yet to learn this, I just think, cool, an edgy intellectual. Now, what you don't want is an edgy intellectual. Here's what you want. A man with a physique like that of, say, Santa Claus or Mark Ruffalo after a good Christmas. He will be wearing a cardigan. He will be playing easily accessible adult-orientated rock. And when you come home, he will say, I've just put a baked potato in. It'll be ready in an hour. Shall I go down on you until it's ready? Reader, I married him. I've just realised that I've left my very expensive watch, which was given to me as a gift, back in my hotel, so I have no idea how long I've been on stage. How much longer have I got to chat? Because obviously I can go on all day. Who's got timings on this? But anyone know? No one cares. Amazing.
I'll find out. 7:26.
7:26, and I came on stage at 7?
Yeah.
Ish. Yes. Yeah, and how much would you like? I didn't even look at the paperwork. I mean, I'm figuring the fans are doing their best, but it's a sweaty day. You're probably not going to want that much chat. So would you want like another 5 minutes more of chat and then ask some questions? I should have prepared for this more. I'll be honest, when I came on stage, I thought I was being interviewed. So you've got to admit, I've held this one down pretty fucking well. I only realised when I saw one stool, I was like, either we're sitting on this together, I'm being interviewed by a ghost that has no legs that will float next to me, or I'm doing this one on my own. And very quickly, using my amazing brain, I realised that I was doing it on my own. So the other themes in the book, so we're talking about a huge amount about sex. I love, basically for me, a taboo subject is the one that I want to be running towards. I want to be throwing flashlights and banging a pan with a spoon and running towards the things that are dirty and secret and shameful. This is what culture must be doing. The other thing that we talk about in the book is fame. Fame is really famous. Like, we talk about fame all the time. Fame, I mean, your president is someone who was president because he was famous. Like, kind of, this is, you know, this drives world events now. But we don't really analyze it anywhere. We don't really talk about how people get famous, why they get famous, what the usual things are that happen during the course of a famous person's life. And there are only really 3 kinds of power in the world. The first is political. Legislative, it's like the courts of justice, it's becoming a politician, you're there to change world events. The second is financial, you run a business, you're in tech, you work in the city, you work in finance, and you work in business. And the third is the soft power of fame. And the reason that fame interests me is because often if you're poor, if you're working class, that's the fame that's most easily accessible to you. You don't need to have capital to start up a business. You don't need to have the connections that you would need to have a political career. If you write the right song, you're in the right film, you take the right photograph if you're a model, you can become famous overnight. And you can change the culture exponentially. Suddenly you have the power, you have people's ears, people will listen to you. You can change the way that culture is run at the moment, but we do not talk about these things. And there are so many things that happen within a famous person's life that are really recognizable tropes and schedules that they will adhere to. For instance, the first thing that I learned about famous people is that most of them don't own coats, because a car will come and pick you up from your house, and then when you get to the event, you will do red carpet where you need to show off the outfit, so you don't need a coat then. And then at the end of the event, you will get back in a car and be driven back home, and you don't need a coat. And so famous people don't wear coats, they just wear cars instead. Similarly, all famous people have gigantic heads. Like really famous people, the first thing you will notice when you meet them is you have a huge head. Basically, if you are a mother and you're giving birth to something that looks like an Easter Island statue, that child will be on the cover of Time magazine in 20 years' time. That is going to be a famous person. Thirdly, there kind of isn't any such thing as being famous. Like, I was interviewing Benedict Cumberbatch last week, because whenever I get asked, I always say yes, because it's just nice to look at his face. And I was saying, how long have you spent being famous today? And he got it completely. He was like, well, I got up, I fed the baby, I wasn't being famous then, I watched telly, I wasn't being famous then. When I got in the taxi driver recognized me, so I was famous for the amount of time that I was in the taxi. Then I got out of the taxi, I was walking down the street, no one recognized me, I wasn't famous then. So he'd spent about 20 minutes all in all being famous. The rest of the time, he wasn't famous at all, because fame isn't something that affects you. Fame is something, it's a spore that affects the minds of the people who know who you are. I found this out when I had to do a photo shoot for the Times of London that I worked for. We were publicising the book, and the photo shoot, the theme of the photo shoot was fame. And so we were like, go and do pictures of Catelyn being famous. And then we were like, well, how do you show that? Like, there's no way to show me being famous. In the end, I dressed up like lots of famous people. So I dressed up like Audrey Hepburn and Faye Dunaway the morning after she's won the Oscars, and Marilyn Monroe. I did the Marilyn Monroe shoot in that iconic white dress with the hairdryers blowing up my dress. And unfortunately, my period had started 2 days early, which I wasn't expecting at all. And so I had to talk to the makeup girls and go, can you just pop out and get me some tampons? Like, I'm in an iconic white dress, I'm gonna need them. And because they're very young, they came back with these tiny little things that were like something a fairy would use to dam up a tear duct. And I was like, I'm 43, I've had 2 kids. Get me something the size of a badger with a rope attached to it. You can come here to play. I'm menstruating right now. So there is no such thing as being famous. Like, kind of, it is something that affects other people. And I've calculated the amount of fame that I have. It is 17%. Here in a bookstore, I'm famous. You're looking at me, I'm sitting on a stool, so there I'm famous. If I went to a vegan cupcake shop where there was a girl wearing a lot of eyeliner, she would probably recognize me there. I would be famous. If I go to the Diane von Furstenberg shop and try and get a discount, not a fucking sausage. So I am about a gay club, I will be recognized there. A library, I'll be recognized there. Everywhere else, nothing. So I calculate I'm about 17% famous. Enough to know better than to behave the way I still do around famous people. So I interviewed Paul McCartney. I'm still confused about Paul. Part of me wants him to be my dad, him to be my dad. The other part of me still really wants to bang him in about 1968. So that's a confusing dynamic to work with anyway. And I thought the way that you show people you love them isn't by going, I love you. It's by thinking of the cleverest questions you can and allowing them to say something they've never said before. That's how you show them you love them. So I came up over days of working with science with the cleverest question that I could ask Paul McCartney, which was, Paul, if, heaven forbid, you were involved in a massive car crash and your face got completely smashed off, would you rebuild your face with plastic surgery as that of Paul McCartney again? Or would you get a different face? Which is a clever question, because it's like, okay, would you like to be anonymous now for the next 20 years of your life? If you had enough time being Paul McCartney, would you like to be someone else, or would you still like to be Paul McCartney? Are you happy with it? Paul did not see that that was a clever question, and just went, oh, we don't talk about things like that. Horrible girl. Similarly, last year, so when U2 were on tour last year, they during the song Ultraviolet, they decided they were going to have lots of pictures of sort of famous feminists on the screen behind them. And one of the pictures was of me. I specified that it was me doing this face. So when they actually flashed it up on stage, it looked like I was eating the edge. And because they were using a picture of me, the word came to me before the gig that Bono would like to meet me. I love U2. I've always thought I'd get on like a house on fire with Bono. Bono is the man that told the amazing story about how when he went to Frank Sinatra's house, Frank Sinatra started to tell a very, very long anecdote. And Bono was very, very drunk. And this anecdote did not end. And Bono realized he needed the toilet. And the anecdote did not end. And Bono thought, I can't interact with Frank Sinatra, he's Frank Sinatra, and he will probably kill me. And Bono made the executive drunken decision to just piss himself on the sofa rather than stop Sinatra in his anecdote. And then Bono told us that story. So I was like, I'm going to get on with Bono, right? This is going to be, I love Bono. So I finally meet Bono. We have this brilliant chat talking about politics and feminism and all this kind of stuff. He's brilliant and lucid and witty and well-informed and amazing and all this stuff. And at the end of it, he goes, Caitlin, I've really enjoyed this chat. We should go for lunch. At which point I think, no, I'm going to play it cool. And I go, that sounds amazing, Bono, but I'm kind of really caught up on British Bake Off at the moment, so have to take a rain check on that. I've not heard from him since. I kind of don't play it cool with Bono. He doesn't have that time, is what I've learned. Well, I think that was the other 10 minutes that I needed to talk. Let's pro this, isn't it? Like, you would think I would know what I'm doing, but I'm just literally a woman on a chair trying not to show you her knickers. Has anyone got any questions? Other than, can you keep your legs together? I really don't want to see what's up.
Anybody any questions? You raise your hand.
You were first. Can you shout?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we don't need to shout. You're there, aren't you? Yeah. Let's not pretend this is Madison Square Garden. You're there, yeah. Cry out, sing out.
I've read most of your books.
Really, I haven't. Amazing. Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Why not Coldplay? Why not, why of all the bands that
Yes.
you mentioned, why not Coldplay?
Oh, I love them. I've tweeted many times that I believe that in my lifetime it will be socially acceptable to like Coldplay. Like, kind of, that is. I absolutely love them. I interviewed Coldplay right at the beginning of their career. On the day that I worked out later, the day after Chris Martin had lost his virginity, he turned up in the pub looking really excited, and he was so excited about life. He just sort of came in. He was like, "Whoa, we're doing an interview. That's amazing! I'm going to drink lemonade. That's incredible!" And later I realised it wasn't my amazing personality that was making him like that. It was the fact these balls had been emptied for the first time. So, yeah. So Coldplay, they're good. Another question?
Anybody else?
You get the mic.
I don't.
Ah.
I don't know how to use.
Oh, no.
I can't believe you're about to get another music question in a row.
Oh, no, that's great. Well, no, there is a huge amount. I didn't even mention that. There's a lot about music in the book. So, yes, that's correct.
And it's about that. Because I didn't know if it was a metaphor or not, but there's a moment where you talk about 1 year there were all these amazing women musicians.
Yes.
And the next year, a room full of men end up as
Yes, totally.
Was it that stark, and why?
Yeah.
Because women were still making music.
It was very noticeable at the time. So I was at Manager Maker during Riot Girl, and I would have lots of arguments with the member about Riot Girl. At one point, I was told that I wouldn't know what it was like to be a fat teenage girl walking down the street and getting hassle. I was a fat teenage girl walking down the street and getting hassle. He was a 32-year-old man called Jim who wore a hat, which kind of bears out what I say. No, with the thing with Riot Girl, I love the whole Riot Girl movement, but I did learn a lot from it, because I can remember at the time being very frustrated with a lot of the practitioners of Riot Girl, because they would only communicate through fanzines and tiny gigs. They would not talk to the mainstream press. The main reason I was frustrated with this is because I worked for the Times of London and I wanted to do an interview with them, and they were like, no, we were only going to talk to fanzines. And whilst I understood that purity, I knew, coming from a working class background, on welfare, living in social housing, that no girls who lived in a background like that would have access to feminist Riot Girl fanzines. It's just not going to come into their orbit. They were never going to learn about this shit. And if you really want to change the world, you have to have the balls to take your message further. You do have to engage on platforms. You can talk about the terms in which you're going to do that. You can make sure you're protected. You don't need to put yourself into a deliberately hostile environment. But the whole point of talking about any movement towards equality, which is what feminism is you can't keep all the feminism in one tiny special fanzine that only 3 people have read because they have the right hair. The whole idea about feminism is everybody needs to learn about it. So I understood their reasons for not doing it, but I, even at that time, just went, if I am ever involved in some kind of massive feminist movement, I will not be only in fanzines. I will go out there and spread the word. And reader, I kept that promise. I've appeared on shitty daytime TV programs talking about feminism. You come in a questioning pair. I love it. Yeah.
Thank you for all your fabulous books. I also really, really loved Race by Wolves.
Oh, thank
And I
you.
don't know what that experience was like for you. It was a television series, but I'm wondering if it's something that you'd like to do again, or
Yeah. So how were you getting it in the States then? Did you download it illegally through some kind of... Yeah. Yeah. We kept tweeting in a way that we hoped people would be able to download it illegally here, but without us being culpable. Yes, it's possible to download the sitcom that I made with my sister, which is about a working class family on benefits, helmed by a single mum who is just a brilliant preacher man woman, and she's got 5 kids, and there's no dad, and Aretha is an introverted 15-year-old ginger lesbian who hates her extroverted, brunette, sex-mad older sister, Jermaine. Jermaine is named after Jermaine Greer. Aretha is named after Aretha Franklin. Who else is in there? Mariah is named after Mariah Carey. All of her children are named after feminist heroes. It was great to make. Unfortunately, it fell befoul. We were the 3rd biggest sitcom in Britain, and we won the Palme d'Or for the best sitcom in Europe, which meant we had to beat off a lot of Spanish mime to get that particular trophy. But there were internal politics at Channel 4, which if any of you want to take me to the pub, I can take you for a drink and tell you about. And it was cancelled by a lunatic, so we don't have that anymore. But I'm comforting myself. I've lost one award-winning sitcom, but I'm now making what will hopefully be an award-winning film, because we start shooting. Yeah! God, American audiences are so much nicer. Whenever I say this in England, everyone will be like, all right, don't get too above yourself. You've become a trifle boastful. We're all doing as best we can. Yeah, America's like, yeah, you're making a film, that's great. Yeah, I'm making a film, it's fucking great. And it's got an American in it to prove that we're not biased against you. Beanie Feldstein, who you may have seen in Lady Bird, is playing a teenage me, which is amazing. And she's going to be such a huge star. She's so radiant and so fucking amazing. And I'm having to teach her a Wolverhampton accent. She had to go and live in Wolverhampton for 2 weeks, and I would just call her every day going, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And our cast is absolutely amazing. I can't tell you who we've got, because it's all contractual, but we've got some of the biggest stars in the world playing cameo roles in it, which I blagged pretty heavily for. So no, it's going to be amazing. So yeah, the film of How to Build a Girl. I can tell you now, it opens with a sequence where our teenage heroine is masturbating in a library to Cannonball by the Breeders, whilst thinking about Mr. Rochester from Jane Eyre. So, if nothing else, I've done what I was put on earth to do, I feel. I can just tick that box. Yeah, I did that. That was what I was meant to do, and I did that thing. Yes. Hello. Yes.
And I'm just curious to know, when was it that you feel like you came into your voice? And
I'm still a shy, awkward teenager.
when did you and what was it? Like, were there women in your life that were supportive of you, that helped you feel confident in your talents?
Sorry, I've got a mental image of my mother there, and I'm imagining her being supportive of my talents. That wasn't happening. No, I was very awkward, very shy, no self-esteem, full of shame, embarrassed about everything. And then 2 things happened. One, I was so full of shame and self-loathing that something exploded in my brain. Like literally the gland that was producing shame just burnt out by the time I was 18. It just died. It was so exhausted. Somehow I just didn't care anymore. And secondly, and it was around about the same time, so when I started working when I was 16, I started going off, being a journalist, interviewing people, going out. I was a child in a hat, literally a child in a hat, in a room full of grown men, reviewing gigs, interviewing people, and I couldn't be shy and socially awkward there because that would have just got in the way and people would have hated me. And so I had to pretend to be someone who was confident. Like, I literally had to make that day work. And so I'd watched a lot of musicals, and I would simply pretend to be Judy Garland. Like, it was literally, or Annie in Annie, like kind of, that whole drag thing of fake it till you make it, it just works. Like, kind of, if you are yourself not a confident person, and not a confident, witty person, imagine you are someone who is. And what would they do in this situation? And suddenly it becomes so much easier. And after a while, you've been doing it so often that becomes you. But like, and the thing is that you're making a conscious decision to do that, but that is how everybody learns every aspect of their personality. You are simply observing something that someone else has done and going, oh, I'll have that, and I'll have that. And so I think it's best generally, particularly for girls, not to think about yourself as a human being or a woman or a girl, which has got so much connotations and freighted stuff loaded against it. Think of yourself as a small museum, and you're just collecting these little things like, oh, I like that phrase, I like that saying, I like that dress, I like that hair, I like that attitude, like kind of these words that I will use more often, and just collate yourself as a little museum. That feels like quite a stress-free thing to be. Being a woman is so fraught and it's such heavy stakes, and there's all these things a woman has to be. If you're a small municipal museum, how much more pleasant? Plus, you can charge an entry fee. Lovely gift shop around the back. I don't even know where I'm going with this. I literally just saw a joke and went for it. 9 times out of 10, I just want to end a sentence with, up my bum. I just kind of, you're making a sign like, please stop now. You've got to the point where we're talking about put things up your bum.
I love it.
Oh,
Keep
really?
going.
You love it up the bum?
Yeah.
Sorry, this is, look at all of this, it's great. Like, we're just all talking.
Are there other questions? Raise your hand.
Hi.
Hi, I know it's all fiction. I know it's all fiction.
Yeah,
In
there
the
is a
book,
very firm
all-
legal disclaimer
all
in the front.
Legal, I read it.
Absolutely, yeah.
But more about sort of your family.
Oh, right, yeah.
And how in writing the book and even your past books, your family is wacky and front and center in a few places. And how do they, does it matter how they feel and or how you paint them into the book and you're still close to them?
The great thing about being in my family, other than that they provide me with an enormous amount of material, which I then get them to sign legal disclaimers saying it's not based on them, always make sure you work that system, is that they just don't care. I've got 7 siblings, I've got 2 children, I've got a husband, I've got 2 parents, and I think out of all of them, certainly none of them read everything I've written. Most of them have written nothing I've written. They just don't care. They find it very tedious, which is understandable. No one wants to read about a close relative masturbating. So I kind of, had they written about it, I would not want to read that book. I totally understand that. But yeah, no, they don't read it. I could put anything in there. In fact, to prove it, at Easter, I did an Easter egg hunt around the house. And one of the clues was in the middle of How to Be a Woman. And it was for my 2 teenage daughters. And they didn't find it because they just would not go anywhere near that book. It was just, they forfeited chocolate in order to not read my dirty book. So it's the most secret place in the world, other than up my bum. I feel like I've got this recurring riff now that I'm just going to go with. I'm kind of...
Hi. So 1, I think you're incredible, so thank you so much for being here. And 2, I work in consent education, and I was wondering if you could expand on the role literature can play in modeling like good, sexy consent.
In what education?
Consent education.
Consent education.
Yes.
That's a new thing, isn't it? Yeah. And good. It's good that it is. And it's not good that it's new. It's good that it should have been around for a long time, but it's good that we have finally invented it. Well, this is the thing, Mike. This is why I really believe in, although I've written quite a lot about politics, I'm very interested in politics, I've got some ideas about how politics could change in the next couple of years that I'm really excited to be working on, but they're secret at the moment. I still generally believe in culture being the most powerful thing, because it's the most immediate, it's the most accessible. It's an entry point. You can take part in culture much quicker than you can take part in politics or legislation or education or any of these things. Simply in the language you use, what you choose to read, what you're doing on social media, what you choose to retweet, what language you choose to use, which hashtags you engage in, what you watch, what you spend your money on, how you recycle, what you wear, like kind of all of these things, that is part of culture, and you are making those decisions every day. And there are things that, and I'm also haunted by the Steve Bannon quote, when he was talking about how he masterminded the Trump campaign, and he said that politics is downstream of culture. And I think that's absolutely true, that culture is where things start. You forget how different everything was 10 years ago. Like sort of the very beginning of social media, before everybody was on it. I've got that time hop thing on my Twitter. And me and all my friends that are really interested in politics, we had a time hop from 2009, and it was all of us going, God, politics is so boring now. It's all just converged on the center ground, like kind of everybody's agreeing, there's sort of like nothing much is happening, like kind of politics is just going to carry on being boring and sort of like, in the middle forever. Obviously now that's very different. And you can see that is down to social media. And the key thing is this, like this is one of the big things I'm going to be writing about next. Tim Berners-Lee, the guy who invented the internet, when they were inventing the internet, the biggest thing they were worrying about was how are we going to get people to use this? No one knows what it is. It's a completely new thing. How are we going to get people to use the internet? And they had to decide on the primary algorithm that would drive the internet. So on why would they classify and push information the fastest? Would they push things the most? Would the algorithm push the most verified information, the most popular information, the most interesting information, the most recently discovered information? And instead, the algorithm they decided to base the internet on was the things that cause the most division, the things that people argue the most over. The primary algorithm of the internet is to find the things that people disagree about the most, and those are the things that are pushed. So this completely explains the political situation that we have, not just here, in every world where people are on social media, politics has become hugely divisive in a way that we have not seen in the last century. As everybody who's on social media is infected by this tone. This is the biggest migration that we've ever had in history. Isn't the one after the Second World War or the Syrian refugee crisis now. It's humans onto the internet. A third of the world's population has migrated in the last 10 years onto the internet, onto social media, where we have a global consciousness. And this is where we have set the tone for what we are as human beings. And the place that we're in is built on divisiveness and arguments. And once you know that, and once you know you're part of that, then that's how you start to change things. You're like, okay, well, we're part of this. One of the big things that I've decided I'm going to start this big campaign in the next couple of weeks, it's like, as things get more and more heated and more divisive, there's the liberals, I'm presuming generally you're all liberals here, there's the liberals I know are like, okay, well, what do? Do we fight fire with fire? Do we start using this kind of language and this kind of rhetoric? Do we start playing dirty? Do we start sort of having like violent protests? Are we going to go the way of the suffragettes? What do we do? Or do we carry on, when they go low, we go high? And I think the key to all of this is that the more unreasonable and heated everything gets, the more reasonable you have to be. You have to be just staying there in the middle. You can't shift your ground. You have to go, no. Just the more angry this gets, the more cheerful, relaxed, loving, and reasonable I'm going to get. Because at some point, people are going to get scared about how angry and overheated everything is. People are not going to like it. We're going to be in a dark, scary, horrible, restrictive place. And we're going to look around and go, okay, I don't like this anymore. What do I want? And all the calm, cheerful, happy people who've just stood their ground all the way through going, here I am, this is what I believe in, this is what this country should be like, this is what we should be like as a people, these should be our basic beliefs. Stand there like a beacon, do not move your ground is right, do not shift, become incredibly reasonable, become amusedly reasonable, bask in how lovely and reasonable you're going to be about this. Because it'll also stop you having a heart attack and wanting to throw yourself out of a window. It's like kind of, these are dark times. So yeah, I think that answered the question. And now, one more and then, one more and then it's all hot and you probably want to go, like kind of, because I can just go on all day. I mean, yeah.
There's one over here.
Oh, okay, cool. You first. God, your skin's amazing. Do you actually have pores? You don't appear to have any pores on your face. Ah, that's what it is. Celtic background by any chance? Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's got a chunky ending, all right. I write every day between my children going to school and my children coming back. I write on the patio in my garden because that's where I can smoke. I sit there drinking very cheap instant coffee, and I smoke about 4 or 5 roll-up cigarettes. American Spirit, that's the tobacco that Kate Hudson smokes, and therefore must be good. And I write until the kids come back. I write until 10 minutes before the kids come home, where I run upstairs and have a shower. To try and smell like I haven't smoked. And then I come downstairs eating a mint and being all like, yeah, I don't smoke, it's all good. And yeah, so I have to do it all in that time. I'm really lucky, I've never found writing difficult. I've just got a list of all these things that I want to do, and it's a race between me and the lung cancer to get all of these things written before I die. I can't write without smoking, but as the more I smoke, the more likely I am to die without having written all these things, so I've got to sort that out at some point. And yeah, I've got like the next 10 years worth of projects easily. So there's this film, there's another film, I'm writing the sequel to How to Be a Woman, which I realise has got to be about boys, really, or at least half of it, like kind of boys need help. Like, our boys really need help. I've had years of people going, but what about boys? And me going, I'm busy with girls. Men will have to sort themselves out. But they're not. I thought all these great liberal dudes were going to step up and write books and invent some kind of male feminism and sort our teenage boys out and give them new role models and talk about how scary it is to be a boy and how they don't know what to do and allow men the same kind of emotional latitude that women have, that same feeling of collectivity and being able to share our problems. And if they're not, I'm going to have to do it. So that's the next one. Yeah, and then the sequel to this, it ends so well. The last one's called How to Change the World, and Johanna goes into politics. And I wanted to, we join her in the present day. The whole idea of it being a trilogy is you follow a girl from nothing, with none of the connections, none of the money, none of the party affiliations, and you see her go on and enter politics, because we need to see that as a story. Girls like that, boys like that need to go, no, I could go and do this. I don't need to be connected. I don't need to be born into money. I've got some good ideas and I want to change the world. So that's the plan. And it's basically like a liberal political wank fantasy. I've got all these all these ideas for how you could change the world, and she's going to go off there and do them for me while I just sit there going, oh, it's like the West Wing, but even better.
That's fabulous. I mean, we can call it there.
Yes, okay.
Yes, awesome.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Caitlin.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you. Thank you.